Infinitives in Targum Onkelos. Let's turn to Biblical Aramaic for Biblical Interpreters, page 169. Of course, this is for Biblical Aramaic, but it's a starting point for our discussion. We notice that in Biblical Aramaic there are no infinitives in the GP, DP, and CP stems, although in theory there could have been because Biblical Hebrew has the nifal, covering for GP, pual, and hofal stem infinitives. So let's take off those passive stems and rearrange our table better to reflect the relationship between the active stems and the reflexives. Now let's convert the table for the use of Jewish literary Aramaic. Now we have an afel stem instead of hafel, and then itpael, itpaal, and itafal. Moving to the side, let's look at an example of a pa'al infinitive construct, Genesis 3:11, meikal, where we see the mem prefix on the aleph kaf lamed verbal root. And that's pretty self-explanatory. But now we go to Genesis 2:16 and we see meikal tekul, where we have a cognate finite verb standing next to the infinitive. What's going on? Well, firstly, we see there's a kametz instead of a patach. This is the infinitive absolute, which we had not seen at all in Biblical Aramaic. Now, the infinitive absolute used to exist as a productive part of Aramaic grammar. As we see in this example, from Old Aramaic on the Sephiri stele, you must placate them, where you see first the infinitive absolute and then a cognate finite verb. However, in the history of Aramaic, it looks like the infinitive absolute dropped out. So helpful resources for Aramaic study in this regard are Pot-El and Wilson Wright. Their journal article claims that when you see a different morphology for an infinitive that's acting in this way, that is a diagnostic for Canaanite versus an Aramaic text. Salah Soleil, infinitives absolute in Aramaic have to do with the pressure from other Semitic languages upon that Aramaic text in view. And then finally, you may want to consult Fassberg's book chapter for an overview of the dynamics of all infinitives in all Aramaic dialects. That said, since we're dealing with a translation from Hebrew, it may be helpful from an exegetical sense to consult with the standard books on the infinitive absolute in Hebrew, Yuki Kim's book, and then my book, Modality and the Biblical Hebrew Infinitive Absolute. In Jewish literary Aramaic, in the pa'al stem, we have that kametz to show us that that's an infinitive absolute, and we have context otherwise. So all the other stems, the infinitives absolute, are the same as the infinitive construct in morphology. So we continue reading now in Targum Onkelos.